a lot.
Okay, we're live. We're here. First and foremost, if you see Laura hitting the mute button, it's because she is battling a little bit of a cough. So we will get through this together. So good to be with you again. We were live yesterday with Minette and Caroline speaking about their new book, The Psychological Safety Playbook. And we are here today with none other than Laura Gassner Otting, author of Limitless, now author as of April 4th of Wonderhell. So delighted to have you back on the show.
Yeah, and we're here with Shedletsky, who is the author of the upcoming Speak Up Culture. I'm so excited. What
Love
a
it.
great book.
Thank
So
you.
excited.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are live on, I believe, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We were trying to get Instagram to go, but I don't think it did. So if you are here with us, hop into the chat, say hello. I see my friend Garrett here, who I believe is in Florida. Great to see you, Garrett. And as you join us, please feel free to hop in, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from. Laura, I'm trying to think, how did we meet? I know we have so many friends in common between Mitch Joel and Leanne Davey and Ron Tite and MBS, another three-letter acronym named person like you. I'm trying to think how we first met. Was it Brian Wish?
I think it was Brian Wish. Yes.
I think it was Brian Wish.
It was Brian Wish who said that you and I would get along famously, that we have the same sort of outlook in the world, and that we were both working on books. And he was right on all three counts. So
Sweet.
good job, Brian.
Yes. Bravo, Brian. And you wrote your first book, Limitless. You've now written this one, and I'm really keen to hear about, I know this is a deeply personal book for you, and one that, like, by golly, this was going to get out.
Yeah.
So kind of like, you know, Steven Spielberg wrote Fablemans. This is your Fablemans, perhaps. Meaning because when COVID hit, Spielberg was like, this is the movie I have to make before I die. And so maybe it's a similar feeling to you. My second book will be that, by the way. We can talk about that later. And yeah, I mean, you have a brilliant, interesting history in your career between like executive search, working with Bill Clinton, like crazy stuff. So anyway, I'll just stop talking and say a few more brilliant things than me, and then we'll see where we go here.
Well, I mean, it's a little overwhelming to be compared to Steven Spielberg, I have to say. You know, look, it is true. Like in the beginning of the acknowledgement section of my book, I fess up to the fact that the original version of this book was 85,000 of the worst words you'll ever read, because I wrote them during 2021 when I was so sick. I didn't know if I was going to see 2022, but I wrote them because I'm a writer and I needed to write. Like while I was sick, I was diagnosed with this exceptionally rare autoimmune disease that literally 800 people in the entirety of the United States have ever been diagnosed with. So like 800 people out of 330 million. It took a long time for them to figure out what was wrong with me. And it took even longer for them to get me better. But 10 months of chemotherapy infusions later, I'm in remission. So things are good. But during that process, I was like, I am two things. I am a writer and I'm an athlete. So I'm going to write this damn book and I'm going to train for that damn marathon, right? So like at the end of the year, I had run the marathon. I had written 85,000 words, but I just was so exhausted by the process that I couldn't look at them any longer. And in May of 2022, I picked up the manuscript again and I read it on a plane. I was on a plane to Houston, so 4-hour flight. And I'm reading the manuscript from start to finish. And by the time I finished reading the manuscript, I sent my editor an email. And the email was simply this: why did you edit the first manuscript? Why didn't you just send me back an email with one word in it? No.
Not yet.
No.
Yeah.
Like
do more work.
No. And she was like, well, some writers have to make their way through this stage. And like, I don't know, but like, I would love to hear about your writing process. Cause for me,
Yeah.
I am an exceptionally fast and mostly final form writer. I'm a very fast writer, but it's because I'm a very slow thinker. So for me, like I circle the house. Like I look in the living room window and I see what they're watching on TV, and I look in the kitchen window and I see what they're eating for dinner, and I look in the bedroom window and I see what their, proclivities and kinks are. By the time I find the front door, which is like the hook, the story, the phrase, the like something. Sometimes it's the subtitle of the book. Once I find the front door, I can run in and I know where everything is, like thing one and
Oh,
thing two.
cool.
It's like, so I say like I'm a really fast writer, but it's because I'm a really slow thinker. And what happened in
Interesting.
2021 is that I was a slow and fast writer. And so I didn't have the brain power to think it through. So I had to rewrite the entire thing. And now it's like 62,000, like really much better, much tighter words. How did you write yours? What was your process?
Yeah, well, really, thank you for sharing all that, and I'm glad you're in good health now despite cough. But really interesting. So I do not identify myself as a writer.
Mm,
So yeah, so working with Simon Sinek for all these years, being on the speaking tour, sharing Simon's work, and infusing my own stories and ideas with it, but predominantly, for the first I mean, I've had a career for 15 or so years, but 12 of those have been under Simon's umbrella.
mhm.
And as I was on the speaking tour, everyone would say to me, or not everyone, but a lot of people would say, "When are you going to write your book?" And
Yes.
my response would always be, "If and when I ever come across something worth writing about," because we've all picked up books or have been recommended or handed books from keynote speakers who write books because that's what a keynote speaker does, which
Yes.
I'm pretty sure is a definition, LGO, of a shitty book.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I didn't want to write one of those ever. And so I finally did come across something both deeply personal and something I care about a lot and something that I feel the world needs, which is more speak up cultures. When I first started writing the book, I thought I was just rebranding psychological safety. I thought. And psychological safety, highly important, put very much on the map by Amy Edmondson,
Mhm.
professor out of Harvard. I love Amy personally. I love her work. And I think psychological safety as a label does a little bit of a disservice to what it is because it is a deeply personal, emotional experience. And I think that sometimes when we put the words psychological safety, we put a bit of an academic or white lab coat onto something really human. And so I wrote speak up culture as in, I thought psychological safety was the input to get you a speak up culture as an output. Good old Zig Ziglar, people don't buy drills, they buy holes.
Right.
And then through the process of writing, which I'll share a bit about my process, and then Alejandra, who's behind the scenes here, who is a really big help in writing and researching as well, helped me realize that a speak up culture actually has two different axes. So
Mhm.
one is psychological safety, the other is perceived impact, meaning people will speak up if they feel it is safe and if they feel it is worth it. But
Mm.
even if they don't feel safe, if it's worth it, meaning the stakes are too high to remain silent, people like Ed Pearson at Boeing, who's the whistleblower at Boeing with the 737 MAX, will still speak up because the stakes are too high, even though they don't feel safe doing so.
That's really interesting. So if the even if it's not safe, the higher the stakes, the safety can come down because it matters so much that people speak.
And
Yeah.
that's where you get courage. So
Yes.
so, and I found myself in that situation where, I didn't feel 0 out of 10 on safety, but I didn't feel 10 out of 10. Maybe I felt 6, 7, but it felt worth it enough for my own values, integrities, and belief to speak up. And then the question is, well, is it worth the risk or was it not? Different life for
Yeah.
a different day. So that's like the concept. But so for me, I'd written chapters before. I had written like single chapters. I had written articles and blogs before, but I've never written a book, and I didn't define myself as a writer. I also know that a blank page intimidates me, so I stacked the deck in my favor. My publisher is Page Two. I worked with an amazing developmental editor there, Kendra Ward, who helped me over about 10 to 12 weeks with some Christmas time in there, getting about 29 pages of somewhat sensical and mostly nonsensical notes into a book outline that was like robust and like I had like a 45-page book outline, and
Yes.
that wasn't a pitch to publishers. That was just to go work from. And then on Brian Wish's team on Arcbound, I worked with Ariel Hubbard to help me get a first draft out so
Hmm.
that I could essentially edit my own book as opposed to writing it from scratch, because I knew I just didn't know how to organize it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm similar to you in the sense that like once I see it, then I have to jot down the notes, otherwise I'm going to lose it, and then like I write into it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, I stacked the decks. I knew I needed help to write a book I'd be proud of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that you don't consider yourself a writer, but you have written a book, so you are now the
Oops.
author, Shedletsky, right? And
Yeah,
you were
yeah, yeah.
talking about your next book, so I think maybe it's possible that you're a writer now. It's interesting. Like, so my last book, Limitless, followed a very linear path. Like, here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's the steps that you should take, right? So very much like Tamsin Webster red thread, like here's the shared goal, here's the problem, here's what the problem really is, here's
Yep.
the change that you should make, and here are the action steps to take. Done, easy.
Yep.
Wonderhell is a bit of a different book because Limitless was based around this idea that we are not happy in success because we're following success as defined by other people.
Yep.
Wonderhell is this book where I'm like, okay, well, now that you've defined success for yourself and you're starting to feel a little bit of that success, why aren't you still happy? Like we thought,
Mm.
like it
I've
seemed to me,
arrived.
I've
Yeah.
arrived. Like
Yeah.
everybody told me that if I just achieved success, like it would be easy money, like smooth sailing. And yet it's not. We get to this place and we're like, why is it actually harder? Like I've got a bigger hunger now. There's a faster pace. There's more stress. Like why is that happening? And I, you know, I had over the course of the pandemic, because I had found myself in, this moment of wonder hell, as I called it. Like it's amazing, it's exciting, it's humbling, it's wonderful. And also, as I see this potential that I didn't even know I was capable of, there's this there's this stress, there's this anxiety, uncertainty, imposter syndrome,
Mm.
exhaustion, fear, burnout. It's wonderful, but it's also kind of hell, like trying to achieve the potential that I see that I could be. Like it's actually gotten harder. And when I found myself in Wonderhell, I spent the pandemic interviewing 100 different glass ceiling shatterers, Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, everyday people like me and you who found themselves in these moments. And I was like, there's got to be a way out. There's got to be a way to survive these moments and get out. And much to my chagrin, what I learned was that there's actually no way out of it. You don't survive it, because on the other side of this wonder hell is just the next one, and the next one, and if you're lucky, the next one after that. We have to learn how to look forward to it and plan for it, and learn to thrive in these moments. And so because everybody experiences different emotions, this tsunami of emotion that comes at us, this excitement, the joy, the fear, the uncertainty, the possibility, the potential, the anxiety. Everybody feels different things at different times. I couldn't write it as this linear thing, and
Mm.
that stymied me for a long time. Like, how do I organize the book? And so I ended up organizing the book like it's an amusement park. Like you walk into a park and you can go to any town, you can go to any
Yeah.
ride that
Oh,
you want at
so
any
good.
time. And so, yeah, so the book is like Wonder Hell. And like I have it right here. So you can see it's got a little roller coaster on the front cover, and looks like a little amusement park. And so the
Nice.
idea is like you walk in and you can go anywhere you want. Do you want to go to Imposter Town,
Oh, that's
Doubtsville, Burnout City? And then in each one of the towns, there's 5 different rides, and each of the rides emulate the emotions that you're feeling. So like you
so
just
good.
realize you can be bigger. Come into the Imaginarium where you see this new version of yourself. Oh my gosh, you're trying to handle uncertainty and the ups and downs. Go to the roller coaster. You thought everything was on the right track and then you got bumped off track. Go to the bumper cars. So it like the organization of the book was very difficult to put together. But once I did, it ended up becoming this sort of very fun choose your own adventure type ride.
So good, because it's not linear. I mean, even the experience of limitless may not be linear, but you said, "Here's the problem." Like it was linear to dissect the
Yes.
thesis and offer it. But this
Yes.
is, oh, I love that. So you can literally, and I have the advanced reader as a PDF here. I'm so looking forward to getting my physical hands on the
I know there's like a
actual
little
theme
map of
park.
each town. It's like you
Oh,
are
so good.
here, and and it's and I don't know, like I think that success is kind of like an amusement park in the end, because like you think you're going to go to an amusement park, it's going to be so fun, you're going to go to all the rides, you're going to eat all the candy, it's going to be great, and then it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're like, I'm hot and I'm dehydrated and I'm kind of sunburned, and that corn dog I had might have not been such a good idea, and I'm waiting in line for the roller coaster, and do I really want to go on the roller coaster? And I thought this was going to be
Like,
fun.
when can we go home?
Right, like, I thought this was gonna be fun. Why isn't this fun? And I feel like
Nice.
success
Oh,
is
that's
kind of
so
the
good.
same way. Like, we're told, like, once you succeed, it'll be fun, it'll be awesome, but it's not. And in the interviews that I did, like, every single person I talked to, whether they were an Olympic medalist or a startup unicorn with a $2 billion company, each one of them still had uncertainty and doubt and imposter syndrome. And I was like, well, if they haven't figured it out, right? Like,
Mhm.
the answer can't be there is a hurdle, and once you get past it, everything's great. The answer has to be, how do I learn how to be
And dip
comfortable
into it.
in the discomfort of the
Yeah.
continual growth and evolution and learning and iteration and innovation?
Yeah. Well, being introduced to you, and the first live we did was more so focused on Limitless, but we spoke a little bit about Wonderhell. And as soon as you introduce that concept, which is, as soon as you hear wonder, you just think full, and then you end it with hell, and it just the dichotomy and coexistence of it for any I don't just want to say high achiever, but anyone with dreams or anyone who wants to create big change for themselves or others. Like, it clicks. And it came across for both me and Alejandro on my team at the perfect time, where we were both going into big life changing stuff. You know, me launching a business, writing my first book. Alejandro, I'm sure he's comfortable with me saying he's moving his entire family to a different country, and
Wow.
the both wonderful and hell of that. And it came for us at the perfect time. And I think rare, Laura, is it that you hear just even a title of a book that provides you with a different frame of reference that you're
Yes.
like, oh my God, that's it. Which is what is it? Dr. Becky says two things can be true at one
Yes.
time, and that this can both be wonderful and hell at any given moment.
Well, you know what's
It's
really
just
funny?
helpful. It's
It's
helpful.
I appreciate that, and what's really funny is that, so the book comes out next week, and,
April
5 and a
4th,
half
right?
April 4th, and 5.5 weeks ago, I sat on my desk right behind me with this giant cake from a supermarket. Like, I love sheet cake. Like, I have been to fancy restaurants all over the world, but if you give me a nasty, cheap supermarket sheet cake, I am the happiest girl on the planet. Like this, like,
Winning.
and I'm telling, like, not even just like, I don't even like the fancy whipped cream, like the buttercream, the kind that, like, when you chew on the icing, you can like feel the granules of sugar in your, like, I am
And it hurts
disgusting.
right here.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
am
right there. Yeah.
disgusting. I will own it. But I sat on my desk right behind me. And there's a video on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, of me just like, I didn't even use a plate. Like, I'm just like forkfuls into my mouth, and I'm like, the book comes out, and here we go. And today is my birthday, and I'm using this opportunity to eat my cake and to tell you that this book is coming out. And in the middle of doing it, I was like, and like, birthdays are kind of wonder hell too, because there are these moments where we
Yeah.
stop and we say, who was I in this last year? Who do I want to be in the next year? Like, every birthday is this moment. We're in between who we were yesterday and who we were tomorrow. And so many people text me, they're like, "Oh my God, what a great line." And I was like, I just made that up on the spot. But I would love to say it's clever, but here's the real truth, and here's the real conceit of the book. You and Alejandro both had that experience where you're like, oh my gosh, we're in Wonder Hell. But the truth is, every single one of us is in Wonder Hell, because every single one of us is in between who we were yesterday and who we're
Yes.
about to be tomorrow. And what we do today is informing what we think our potential or possibility is. And here's the other thing: Wonder Hell only shows itself to people who are worthy of it. So if you're not in Wonder Hell right now, maybe you've gotten to like the top of your potential. Fine, cool, awesome.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
my guess is, given that we are evolutionary creatures and like we've survived for millions of years because we keep growing and changing and evolving, that there's probably some part of you, whether it's in work or in your life, that's like, yeah, I do want to do more. Like, I do want to go for that promotion, or I ran that 5K, maybe I could do the 10K, right? Like, every part of us is always like, what else is there out there? Not
Mhm.
in this bigger, better, faster, more, you got to crush it and keep growing, but just in the like, what else is interesting? How many more layers are there inside of me? And I
Yeah.
think that's a fascinating place to be.
Yeah. I remember I watched your sheet cake video, and I think I think I sent you a private message. Maybe it was a public comment around how many takes was that? And you're like, there was only one cake.
One cake,
One
one
take.
take, right?
Yeah.
It was a bunch of people were like, "Wow, how many times did it take you to do that well?" And I'm like, "You think I could have housed a sheet cake for a 17th time?" Like,
Yeah.
one cake, One
One
take.
take.
That's
Love it.
it. Yeah, yeah. So let's go back to speak up culture because, one of the things that you talk about in speak up culture is that there's two things, right? Like, so you have to encourage it because you have to encourage it by like there's got to be psychological safety and
Yep.
the stakes have to be high enough, right? But what happens after, right? Like, how do you
Yeah.
reward the speak up culture so that it happens again and again and again? Because like if somebody does it and then they get smacked down,
Yeah.
it's
So
not gonna
so
work.
so a couple of things. So A, ideally, it both feels safe and is worth it. Ideally, and that's, Kim Scott, everything in our world can be boiled down to a 2 by 2 framework. So high safety, high impact, Yahoo. Low safety, low impact, that's an unhappy marriage between fear and apathy. I've been there. I've seen others there. No fun. And we typically don't speak up. We typically shut up, quiet, quit, resign, whatever. Then there's an interesting one, which is high safety but low impact, which is you're operating within high bureaucracy, or you have a close friend and they're doing a habit that isn't healthy, and you feel safe enough in the relationship to be like, hey, LGO, like you should stop doing that thing.
You
It's
shouldn't
not
eat so
good.
much sheet cake, right?
Yeah, it's sure, sure. But like, I don't have any faith that you're gonna stop your sheet cake volume. So like, I might tell you,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's gonna lead to any change. If I repeatedly speak up, and it's just like it's repeatedly ignored, nothing happens, you know, I'm not gonna keep speaking up. Or I might, but I'm just not confident it'll lead to any change. Then there's low safety but high impact, which is high stakes. And even though it's hard, some people, the really courageous ones of us or who feel really personally connected to that cause will speak up. What you're pointing out is the virtuous cycle between encourage and reward. So to get people to speak up, leaders ought to, or we ought to in our relationships, encourage people. Hey, I really want to hear your opinion. I value your feedback. I'm not getting any feedback, so let me tell them myself first. How am I doing, team? Hey, I'm not getting much feedback, so on a scale of 0 to 10, how clear are my ideas? And if you're all saying 10, I think you're lying. I want
Mhm.
truth. Like all these things. You can even have a suggestion box, which is quite passive. Even worse if it's anonymous, but better to have that than nothing. But then when people finally do, pull open the ropes and step into that boxing ring of speaking up and the lights are on them, are they rewarded for sharing ideas, concerns, disagreements, and mistakes? If they're repeatedly ignored or worse, punished,
Mhm.
then it disappears, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories in Wonderhell is a story I tell about Alan Mulally, who,
I do it too in my
you do,
book.
right. So, his story is about when he went to Ford and he like walked into the Thunderbird room and he basically wanted to see like where all the silos were, like what was happening in every department. And he had this, system green, yellow, red, right? So if it's green, everything's great. If it's yellow, there's some issue, things are slow. If it's red, we're in trouble, like SOS. And he said he went in the first day and everything was green. And he's like, we're losing billions of dollars a year. Like everything can't be green. Like, tell me
Yep.
what's wrong. And everyone's like, no, no, everything's fine. And this went on for a few meetings until finally somebody like bravely
Mark
raised their
Fields.
hand, right,
Mark
Mark Fields.
Fields.
And he
Yeah.
was like, I've got an issue. And everybody around the table gave him ideas. They solved the problem. And Alan, as I'm sure you point out in your book, was like, what did I have to do? I knew at the next meeting, not only was I going to reward him, I moved him and I let him sit right next to me. I put him right next to me. And I was like, Mark, that was amazing. And he goes, wouldn't you know it? The next meeting, it was a sea of yellow, but he had to do the same thing. Like he had to
Yeah.
encourage and he had to reward. And I love that. And I'll go one further. Is
Mhm.
that when Limitless came out, I did a 3-year study from January 2019. It's still going on through present, but I crunched the numbers about a year ago. So before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and as we came out of the pandemic, about what's actually driving the great resignation. And one of the findings, which I thought was fascinating, was that, okay, we know that people who have crappy leaders, the crappy leaders bleed out good staff. We know that. That's
Yep.
obvious.
Yep.
But people who consider themselves good leaders, or people who say, I work for a good leader, but I don't have any relationship with them,
Hmm.
they don't necessarily know what I do every day. They don't hear what I have to say. They're not asking for my feedback. What I tell them doesn't actually impact their decisions. They're a good leader. They're well known, they're popular, they've got all the training. Good leaders who don't have a relationship with their team bleed out their team just as much as bad leaders. And so I thought that
Interesting.
was super fascinating. So, what makes a good leader? Obviously, like in the questions we asked, if I gave you those questions, I would imagine that those questions probably align very closely with, do you have a speak up culture or not, right? Do
Mm.
I feel empowered to raise concerns? Do I feel like the person who's making decisions about me is actually hearing my feedback? Do I feel like people are asking for my opinion about things that matter, right? All of those questions. And when somebody says no, but they also say they work for a good leader, gone.
Yeah. Yeah, this is also the reason, LGO, that I'm really hesitant to label organizations. Like I'm often asked, like, what's a great example of a speak up culture? And I'm like, like, I'm impressed by Microsoft recently. And sure, I was impressed by Microsoft under Bill Gates, even though he's dorky, quite visionary and infinite minded. Under Steve Ballmer, quite competitive, finite minded, performance driven. Now under Satya Nadella, quite good. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. I like what's coming out here. I like some of the decisions that are being made. Now, does that mean every single manager and leader at Microsoft is 10 out of 10 perfect? Of course
Right.
not.
Right.
And to assume that every leader is perfect for every person is also a fallacy. But we know that our relationship with our boss has more of an impact than that of our relationship with our family doctor or therapist, if we have one. And it's at par with our relationship with our partner, life
Yes.
partner, or spouse. Fact. There's also another stat that I reference. I think it's from Gallup, but I could be wrong. I think Susan Sorensen quotes this. If our boss completely ignores us, our likelihood of disengagement increases by 40%. If
Mm-hmm.
our boss only points out stuff that we're bad at, the likelihood is 22%. It nearly improves by half just because our boss acknowledges that we exist. And if our boss goes out of their way to just point out one strength that we're good at, our likelihood of active disengagement is 1%. So just noticing, hey, LGO, you're really good at this. I want to put you into positions to do more of this. It's like, oh my God, I feel valued. I feel seen. I get to use my strengths. I'm more likely to feel fulfilled. Like that's it.
Yes.
And
And I'm gonna do that good thing that I did again intentionally over and over
yes,
and over again.
because I'm
That was
rewarded for it.
yes, like in this research that I did, I found that people who feel like they are their best selves at work look for ways to continue to be their best selves at work. They actively look to repeat the process, right? So
Yes.
if you've got somebody, I mean, honestly, it's like training a puppy, right? If you train a
Yep.
puppy and you give the puppy a reward for doing something good, the puppy's going to do that thing again, right? Like it's the same thing. I joke around that doing client focused work actually made me a much better parent because
Hmm.
like how I trained my clients was like very like how I raised my children, right? Like you catch them being good, you like involve them in conversation, you ask, don't tell, right?
Mm.
You're like you're engaging with them and valuing them, and it that kind of culture I think is I don't think it's difficult to create. It just has to be intentional on your part. And I think, a lot of leaders, the closer you get to the head of the table, the less you're expected to listen, the more you're expected to
Mm.
talk. You're supposed to have all the answers. And one of the things that people experience in Wonderhell is that they are so full of doubt and uncertainty that they don't know what to do, but they can't admit it to anybody because they're alone. So if
Yeah.
somebody's in Wonderhell and they're at the head of the table and they don't know what to do, but they have to ask, what is the best way that they can start showing that vulnerability
Mm.
and start inviting people in to like be in that with them? Because when that leader sees their potential and the potential of the department or the division or the company, they see everybody's potential. So it would make sense to me that if they could create that speak up culture, all of them could thrive in this Wonder Hell together.
Yeah, and so vulnerability, Brene Brown, huge, I've learned so much about vulnerability from Brene, which is great. And one of the things I've learned about her is vulnerability isn't sharing all things at all times to all people. That could be
Mm,
irresponsible and oversharing.
yes.
And so if you're a senior leader and you're feeling this wonder hell, another irony of being a senior leader is the more senior you get, the further away you can get from the truth, and your whisper is a shout and your tiptoes are stomps. You have impact.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it isn't okay to be at the head of the table and to say, hey team, I just want to let you know I have no idea what I'm doing and we're running out of money and but you should tell someone.
Yes.
This is why we have YPO and EO and these groups
Because it's
where
lonely at the top.
it is lonely. And then once you have enough support, I mean, there's no mistake, LGO, that every single leadership development program I've ever come across, the first module is leading self. So we need to know our own instrument and how we play it before we can help others know and fine tune and play theirs. But then it's just bit by bit. Hey team, here's the issue. I have some ideas. I don't have all the ideas. What do you think? Sip it. And vulnerability is positively contagious. And so as leaders model it, it makes it okay and safe, just as Alan Mullally did with Mark Fields in that instance. And I don't blame any of the Ford leaders for behaving the way, because the previous leader was more like Dr. Evil. If you showed yellow or red, you just weren't at the next meeting.
Right.
They were conditioned, much like puppies, in your client parenting example. They were conditioned. If it isn't green, just pretend it doesn't exist, which is not so healthy and quite dangerous.
Which is not so healthy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like there's like there's like a list of questions, right? So, when you go in, you sort of, I think one of the most interesting experience I had was understanding that, like, my staff, when I ran my last company, they didn't care about like what the big plan was and do we have enough money and what's the annual plan for this year and next year and the 5-year strategic plan. They were like, what's the plan for this month, for this quarter, and how's it going to affect me and my job? So when I was telling them about, like, here's this great exciting thing that's happening 5 years from now, they were like, it was like the teacher with Charlie Brown, like, wah 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 wah. They didn't hear. All they were thinking was, how does this affect me? Right. So, like, I had to understand that, what I was worrying about and what they were worrying about were two very different things. So I could only invite them in to give me advice about the things they were worrying about, because they didn't have any interest or any insight into the things that I was worrying about. And that's where the YPO and that's where those other groups come into play. But so it's really understanding, when you say, like, you can't be vulnerable about all the things all the time. It's like, what's appropriate for them?
Yeah. And I call that platinum rule. So golden rule is treat others the way you wish to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others the way they wish to be treated. So for you to have some empathy to go, what do they care about? Like, they can't think of 5 years. They probably don't think they'll be here in 5 years.
Totally.
Like let's talk about next quarter, or at, year end, maybe,
Yes.
So, hey, one comment here from Nathan Stone, and then we're at time, and want to respect both your voice and your next commitment. Loving the title of your book, LGO. Wonderhell comes out April 4th. Grab 17 copies for you and all your friends. What an attention-grabbing headline. Curious how you got to that title.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was on an airplane. I was it was a red-eye flight, and I was on the way home from speaking at an event up in Canada, where I was opening for Malala, right? So I had like a selfie with Malala, and I had just my book had just debuted on the Washington Post bestseller list at #2, right behind Michelle Obama. And I was like, I expected 3 people to buy the book, like my mother, my father, and maybe my sister, like, used from my mother. Like, I really just, I was kind of writing the book because I was speaking and I just wanted to. So I was on this red eye and I couldn't sleep. And I was all fueled up with like ego because, I just like had this great week. And that voice in my brain that normally governs my humility was like gone. I was so exhausted from the book launch and I was so fueled with ego. And I heard this voice in my head going, this thing has legs. This thing has legs. It can be bigger. Like, you were #2. What about #1? Who's under the oak tree with Oprah? Someone's got to be there. Like, why not? You got to talk to someone. Why not you? And I was like, oh, I want it. I want it. That sounds so good. and in that moment, I saw myself under the oak tree. P.S. I haven't been under the oak tree, so like, Oprah, call me. But I saw myself under the oak tree, and I couldn't unsee it. And I was like, how do I get there? How do I get there? And I wrote this Facebook post that was like, I have no idea where I am right now, but 1,200 miles from where I've been and 1,200 miles from where I'm going, and somewhere between the blur that was yesterday and the blur that will be tomorrow is the space I'm in right now. And it's wonderful and it's amazing and it's awesome and it's just incredible. It's wonderful. But also, what else can I do? The burden of this potential is weighing so heavily on me. It's kind of hell. I'm in Wonderhell. And they say, if you can name it, you can tame it. And I was like, bullshit. I don't want to tame it. I want to claim it. So welcome to Wonderhell, where my dreams can come true and yours. And I just wrote this creative post and I didn't think anything of it. And then my publisher actually saw the post and he was like, not for nothing, but that would make a great title of your next book. And then I will tell you this, Shed. I will tell you this, Nathan. I forgot all about that post. I came home, continued to do speaking about Limitless for 9 months. The pandemic happened. Then I started talking to people during the pandemic. I started a podcast, and there were all these themes kept coming up about the moment when everything changes.
Mm.
And then Facebook, thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, drops the Facebook memory.
Memory.
Dim, there is the post. And I was like, oh, that's the moment. That's the thing I've been talking to everybody about. And so, yeah, that's
An
how that
algorithm
is
win.
that's how it worked. So
Well, I feel so grateful that we saw your reincarnation of being Golem with my precious. LGO, it is always such a treat to speak with you. Your energy, your optimism, your just get it done and go is such a joy and treat to be around. Please, please, everyone, check out Laura. Check out her new book, Wonderhell, her first book, Limitless.
and
And
check out Speak Up Culture.
Thank you. Thank you. Speak Up Culture coming up in the fall. So a few months after Wonderhell. But thank you for sharing Wonderhell with us. I think it is going to do some marvelous, marvelous things for many people who are doing some big things in their world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see
Thank
you
you
on the
for
other
having
end.
me.
Yes.